In a dramatic turn during the budget session of Parliament, the Lok Sabha was plunged into uproar following an unusual confrontation between the leader of opposition Rahul Gandhi and the treasury benches over his attempt to quote from an unpublished military memoir authored by former Chief of Army Staff, General Naravane, referenced in the Caravan magazine. A proceeding were underway on the motion of thanks to the President's address. Rahul Gandhi rose to voice his view on national security and foreign policy. But almost within moments, the atmosphere in the House changed sharply when he began quoting from the article in the Caravan magazine that carried excerpts from a yet-to-be-published memoir by General Naravane titled 4 Stars of Destiny.
From the memoirs of Army Chief Naravane. And I'd like you to listen nicely. You will understand exactly who is patriotic, who is not. It'll take a little while. So this is about when 4 Chinese tanks were entering Indian territory. They were taking a ridge in Doklam, and the army chief writes, and I quote from an article that is quoting his book. The tanks were within a few hundred meters of Indian positions on the Kailash range.
No, sir. No, only started. No, he is not yielding.
Disruption was immediate. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh objected that the book has not yet been published and raised concerns about the propriety of quoting unpublished material inside Parliament. He pressed Rahul Gandhi to clarify whether the memoir was in the public domain. Home Minister Amit Shah backed the objection, asking how an unpublished book or a magazine article based on it could be used as a source in the parliamentary debate. Speaker Birla intervened repeatedly, citing parliamentary rules that restrict references to unpublished material or unauthenticated reports during debates. He ruled that books, newspaper clippings or magazine articles unrelated to the House proceedings could not be quoted on the floor. Parliamentary Affairs Minister Kiren Rijiju also raised procedural objections urging adherence to established norms, while some BJP MPs pressed that this was a matter of decorum and discipline in the House.
यदि प्रकाशित हुई है तब तो आप उसका उल्लेख करिए, नहीं प्रकाशित हुई है तो उल्लेख करने का कोई औचित्य नहीं है। अध्यक्ष महोदय,
जो सम्मानीय सदस्य ने कहा वो सत्य नहीं है। तेजस्वी सूर्या ने कांग्रेस के शासन के समय के 4 से 14 के राष्ट्रपति अभिभाषणों का जिक्र किया और उसमें कहा कि इसमें कहीं पर भी इस प्रकार के शब्द मिले नहीं हैं। वो इसको डिस्प्यूट कर सकते हैं राष्ट्रपति अभिभाषणों का रेफरेंस देकर कि भाई 5 के अभिभाषण में है। अरे सुनो ना, अभी आगे सुनो, मुझे सुनो। और 349 को एक कोट कर रहे हैं कि अगर बिजनेस के रेफरेंस में मैगजीन है, आज के बिजनेस का रेफरेंस है राष्ट्रपति का अभिभाषण, महामहिम द्रौपदी मुर्मू का अभिभाषण। वो अभिभाषण के मुद्दे पर कोई आर्टिकल है जिसको वो कोट करना चाहते हैं, वो भी 359 के साथ में पढ़कर कर सकते हैं। एलिगेशन लगाने से पहले यहाँ पर उनको चेतावनी देनी पड़ती है माननीय अध्यक्ष, 24 घंटा पहले।
आप सदन में प्रतिपक्ष के नेता हैं, पूर्व में भी अनुभव रहा है। सांसद प्रियंका गांधी जी ने भी एक बात बोली थी तो उन्होंने ऑथेंटिक उस किताब को यहाँ पर टेबल पे किया। मेरा जो रक्षा मंत्री जी ने जो विषय उठाया है उसमें कहना है कि हम जो बोलें उसको ऑथेंटिक कर सकें, उसी विषय को सदन के पटल पर ये मर्यादा बना के रखें।
The disruption grew so intense that the Lok Sabha was adjourned multiple times with shouts and counter shouts from both treasury and opposition benches, and business proceedings halted for the day. So what is this book that triggered the row, the unpublished memoir? The memoir, 4 Stars of Destiny, was written by General MM Naravane, former Chief of Army Staff, and reportedly deals with strategic decisions and key movements during his tenure, including India's border standoff with China, such as the 2020 Galwan clash and eastern Ladakh tensions. Though widely discussed in political and media circles, the book has not been officially published due to pending security clearances. Now, portions of its contents have appeared in media reports that cited the unpublished draft. The article in question appeared in the Caravan, a well-known long-form journalism magazine. It draws on the portion of the draft memoir of the former Indian chief, General Naravane, a book that, as I say, has not been published, and secondly, it has been converted into a 33-page article. According to the article or the report, it offers a rare insider account of India's handling of high-stake border tension with neighboring China, including the 2017 Doklam standoff and Galwan. The article describes a critical moment in August 2020 when Chinese armored units were advancing towards Indian positions in the Kailash Range area. Indian field commanders believed the only way to stop the advance was to open fire with artillery. Because that action could have triggered a full-scale war with China, the army chief sought clear political instructions from the highest level of government. The report says General Naravane made repeated calls to the senior ministers and national security officials asking one basic question: what are my orders? But for a significant period, no firm directive was given. Now, what makes the episode controversial is the claim that when the Prime Minister was consulted, he did not issue specific order to fire or not to fire, but instead left the decision to the army chief, effectively telling him to decide as he saw fit. The article argues that this was not simply tactical choice but a movement of political responsibility. It says decisions that could lead to war are meant to be taken by elected civilian leaders, not delegated entirely to military commanders. By leaving the call to the army chief, the report suggests that the political leadership avoided taking direct ownership of the risk of escalation. The article then turns to the Caravan clash of June 2020. Galwan clash of June 2020. It challenges the idea that the clash was sudden or unavoidable. It says Chinese troop movements and aggressive posturing had been building for weeks and that Indian commanders in the sector were underprepared and slow to recognize the scale of the threat. According to the report, intelligence and early warnings were not fully acted upon, which contributed to the deadly confrontation. On the disengagement, process that followed, the article focuses on the creation of so-called buffer zones along the line of actual control. It says these zones reduce the chance of immediate clashes but also meant that Indian troops stopped patrolling certain areas they had previously accessed. In practical terms, the report argues this amounted to the loss of control over some contested ground, even though it was not officially described as territorial loss. The report also questions how these developments were communicated to Parliament and the public. It says that the government did not hold detailed briefings on what had changed on the ground and avoided acknowledging the strategic cost of disengagement. According to the article, the official public narrative projected stability and success while internal military reality was far more complex and constrained. A key theme running through the report is civil-military relations. It argues that the crisis exposed a gap between political authority and military responsibility. The army was expected to manage a potentially explosive situation with China but without receiving unambiguous political direction at the most dangerous moment. The article frames this as a form of political abdication rather than delegation, suggesting that instead of elected leaders making the hardest call, the burden was shifted onto the army chief. Taken together, the Caravan article makes 3 central claims. First, India came closer to a war with China that was publicly acknowledged. Second, that the military was left to manage the danger without clear political ownership. And third, that the disengagement that followed quietly changed the status quo on the ground. These assertions, drawn from the former chief's unpublished memoir, are what transformed a magazine report into a parliamentary flashpoint. Now, however, while the opposition quotes a report on this unpublished memoir, General Naravane has on record given several accounts of India's victory against China in the Galwan clashes. Listen to this.
India as a country showed to the world that it is possible to take on that neighborhood bully, as is the case everywhere. Whether it is a school bully or a neighborhood bully, you have to stand up to him sometime or the other. Right. We showed it can be done.
The controversy isn't just procedural. It reflects a broader political battle over transparency, national security and civil-military relations. Opposition leaders argue that insights from a senior former army chief on key strategic episodes in the public interest must be debated, while the government says that the parliamentary debate must adhere to the rules and avoid reliance on unverified sources. And at the heart of the debate is a stark question: is a former army chief memoir suggesting that the Prime Minister instructed a senior commander with something akin to decide as you see fit in a time of crisis? Is that a breach of civilian oversight or merely a different style of political military coordination? I believe that giving free hand to army chief was the right thing to do. If we look at the way Uri, Balakot and Sindoor operations proceeded, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has always given free hand to the armed forces. Prime Minister Modi has always allowed armed forces to make independent choices. It shows that Prime Minister Modi is not a micromanager. It shows that Prime Minister Modi allows heads of armed forces to make decisions independently and they enjoy a free hand during operation. It is a matter of style which reflects the way Prime Minister runs the country, which shows that it was a decision in which Prime Minister asked the army chief to take a call which will give him a greater free hand. So it is not an abdication of position. It reflects a working style whereby Prime Minister allows great operational freedom to our armed forces. This is how I see when Prime Minister's decision was communicated to former Army Chief General Naravane, जो उचित हो वो कीजिए, which means that you are being given a free hand to deal with the enemies of this country.
Operation Sindoor was the best example of tri-service synergy under clear-cut political directive and full freedom to act or respond.
And I played this bite for one specific reason, that this is the template that has been true when it came to Uri, Operation Balakot, and as you heard, even in Operation Sindoor, the Chief of the Army Staff, what did he say? That we were given free hand to deal with the enemy.